Suggest to go or suggest going? Decide to go or decide going? These are the questions that drive my students crazy. Do we use the infinitive, like to go, after verbs, or the gerund, like going, after verbs? Well, I've got some bad news and good news for you. Let's start with the bad news. Now, the bad news is it all depends on the verb, and there's no real rule to help us know which verb is followed by the infinitive and which verb is followed by the gerund. And that's why it's so important that when you learn a new verb in English, you learn it in context, so that you learn exactly, for example, the word dare. Don't just learn the word dare, learn it in context. Like, I didn't dare to touch the spider. Dare to touch. Okay, dare is followed by the infinitive. Now, that being said, in this video, I do have some little tricks that are going to help you identify which verbs need to be followed by the infinitive and which verbs are going to be followed by the gerund. A lot of students have requested this video. I think you're going to find it really useful and that it's going to help you stop making so many mistakes in English grammar. So let's start with when to use the gerund. Okay, the gerund is the ing form of verbs: going, eating, taking. And before I tell you how to know which verbs are followed by the gerund, I want to tell you a couple of other very common places where we use the gerund. First is after prepositions of time and place. For example, I always have breakfast before leaving the house. I always have a cup of tea after eating lunch. I got wet after walking in the rain. And the other common place we use it is when we're replacing the subject or object of a verb and we're basically using it as a noun. For example, Dave loves jumping in the swimming pool, but jumping in the pool is forbidden. But swimming is a great exercise. In that situation, we're using jumping and swimming as the subject, as a noun and as the subject of the sentence. Okay, so as you saw in that example, Dave loves jumping into swimming pools. Who doesn't? And this is my first guideline for knowing when to use the gerund. So basically, when we're using verbs that tell us what we like and what we don't like, we use the gerund. I've got lots of examples of this, so let's have a look. All right, things I like doing. I like watching football. I love going on holiday. I enjoy playing the ukulele. I fancy going to the cinema this weekend. I adore traveling to foreign countries. I don't mind driving long distances. I feel like eating out tonight. Okay, all these verbs tell you more or less what I like, and they are all followed by the gerund. I said I like watching football. Yeah, I prefer watching football to playing football. So prefer is also followed by the gerund. And now things that we don't like. Let's have a look at some examples of things that we don't like, which are all followed by the gerund. I don't like being ill. I hate people smoking near me. Hate smoking, hate people smoking near me. Some people detest going to the dentist. I can't stand waiting for the bus. I tolerate driving in heavy traffic. Some people dread turning 40. Not me, I did it last year. No, this year. Anyway, all good. Okay, so all those verbs that tell us what we like and what we don't like are followed by the gerund. Pretty cool. Okay, there are some other common verbs which I like to think of in pairs, and these are followed by the gerund too. Start and finish. I started driving when I was 17. I finished reading the book last week. Suggest and recommend. I suggest leaving early if you want to arrive on time. I recommend taking an umbrella as it's going to rain. And one very common mistake with this is the verb to be worth. Okay, to be worth is followed by the gerund. It was worth spending a little bit more money for the premium service. Okay, we're going to look at when to use the infinitive after verbs now, but if you want a full list of verbs that use the gerund and that use the infinitive, in other words, all the ones from today's lesson and many more, then download the worksheet for this lesson. It's a really, really useful resource, and if you have problems knowing which verbs are followed by the gerund and which verbs are followed by the infinitive, it's a really, really valuable resource for you to have. It's free, it's from me to you, so just click up there. Oh, there's a link in the description too. Okay, let's have a look at when to use the infinitive. Okay, so before we look at which verbs are followed by the infinitive, let me just tell you two very common places that we need to use the infinitive. This is a really, really, really common structure in English. Okay, the first place is after adjectives or comparatives. In the structure, it's adjective or comparative to verb. And this is a really, really common structure in English. For example, it's hard to learn English if you study infrequently. It's easier to learn if you study every day. Okay, and the second point is to show purpose. Like, what's the purpose? Why are you doing that? Let's have a look at an example. I went to Spain. Why? Why? What's the purpose? What was the purpose that you went to Spain? I went to Spain to learn Spanish. Okay, so we're showing the purpose with the infinitive. I went to Spain to learn Spanish. Okay, this is actually one of the things I talk about in that video, which is when to use to or when to use for in English. It's a really great video for you to watch after this one. I called the internet company. Why? What was the purpose for that? I called the internet company to ask for a faster connection. Okay, my first guideline for knowing when to use the infinitive after verbs in English. Now, this is not an exact science, it's just my guideline, but I like to think that we have a lot of verbs that we can use for decision making. Like, use your imagination. We're in a meeting at work and we're making a decision. Let's have a look at a little story about this that will help us put this into context and use lots of verbs that use the infinitive after. The salesman requested to meet us in person. We decided to meet at 12 o'clock. He offered to come to our office. I asked my boss to come. He wanted to increase their prices. We refused to meet his demands. We needed to find a better solution, so we planned to look for cheaper companies. In the end, he agreed to keep his current prices and he promised to freeze their prices for 2 years. We managed to find a solution, so we chose to celebrate after the meeting. Okay, so when we're using verbs that can help us make a decision like this, we follow the verb by the infinitive. Okay, here's a little small trick for a few words that my students always get confused with. They are expect, hope, wish, and wait. And good news, they all use the infinitive. I hope to see you soon. I expect to finish the job before the weekend. The boss wishes to see you now. I waited 4 hours to enter the stadium. And here's a strange one. Help? Well, this is followed by the infinitive, but we don't have to use the word to. Like, can you help me move this heavy box? Is perfect. Can you help me to move this heavy box? Is also perfect. You'll hear both, you can use both, they're both correct. So as I said, the most important thing to do is to learn verbs in context every time you learn a new verb. And also, try to find similarities between verbs that act the same way, like, you know, likes and dislikes, or verbs that you could use in a meeting to make a decision. And you can continue this now by downloading the full list of verbs that I've prepared for you. I've given you an example so you can see how each verb is used. As I said, it's got all the examples from this lesson and many, many more, and it's free. So click the link in the description and I will send that to you via email. As I mentioned before, that video is really going to be useful for you too. It's the difference between to and for in English. There's the link to download the full list of verbs from today's lesson. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.